Before you pick up a drill and rope and begin rigging a cave, you should first apprentice with those who have experience, and read everything you can find on the subject. Good texts on rigging include On Rope by Smith and Paget, Vertical by Worrald, and Alpine Caving Techniques by Marbach and Tort. I'll put links to each of these books in the description below. Once you reach a place where the cave passage turns vertical and the need arises to break out the rigging gear, there are some general considerations to keep in mind. Take your time, because once a pitch is rigged, it will remain that way until someone later decides the bad anchor needs to be fixed, having to choose between the lesser of two evils: replace it or leave it. Convenience and ease of use may eventually translate into safety considerations when team members become exhausted. Rig for someone who may be tired and carrying a heavy pack, not for someone who is fresh and traveling light. If faced with a difficult rigging situation and you're unsure of what to do, consult others on your team. There are different rigging styles based partly on differences in geology and morphology of caves in different regions, but also due to differences in culture. The two main styles are often referred to as indestructible rope technique and alpine technique. In general, IRT uses a larger diameter and more abrasion-resistant rope with a single strong main anchor, with rope pads used to protect especially bad areas of contact with the cave wall, whereas alpine technique uses thinner and more dynamic rope with rebelay anchors and deviations to avoid having the rope contact the wall at all. IRT traditionally has a strong bias in favor of natural anchors, while alpine technique relies more heavily on artificial anchors. In modern caving, the use of one style or the other is sometimes blurred, with a hybrid approach often being the most effective. The Renaissance caver should become familiar with the equipment and methods used for both styles and learn the associated advantages and disadvantages of each. Always rig with static or semi-static rope. The main reason is better abrasion resistance, but static ropes are also easier to rappel and climb. The diameter of rope used depends on a number of variables. Typical rope diameters vary from 9 to 11 millimeters. Smaller diameter rope is lighter and takes up less pack space, but is less durable. While contact with the cave wall should always be avoided, this becomes more critical as rope diameter decreases. While the handling and friction characteristics vary significantly with rope diameter, most common descenders, such as standard racks, micro racks, and bobbins, can be adapted to ropes in the 9 to 11 millimeter range. Ropes that will be left in place for a long period of time, and especially if they will see a lot of traffic, should be of a larger diameter, so they don't need to be replaced as often. If rigging pitches with a pre-existing anchor, then information should be available on the length of rope needed, and the proper length can be brought. But for new exploration, the character of the cave being explored, or that of similar caves in the immediate region, can be used as guidance on how much rope may be needed to facilitate exploration. For new exploration, ropes are generally cut to length from a long spool as pitches are rigged. If ropes are rigged that are longer than needed, and they won't be cut to length, then excess rope can be kept coiled at the top of the pitch for contingencies, but it is more important to ensure the tail of the rope reaches the bottom. If there is excess rope at the anchor, then it's usually best to rig with a releasable hitch, such as a tensionless anchor or a munter mule knot. These can be easily released for lowering someone who may become stuck on rope, though it's always preferred that anyone new to vertical caving first learn to get themselves out of situations by practicing down climbing or changeovers in a controlled environment. But equipment failure, rockfall, or health issues are possibilities that could incapacitate even an experienced vertical caver. Always tie a knot in the end of the rope when first descending a pit. A double overhand knot is the standard, but a figure 8 on a bight works and provides a loop to clip into or a convenient way to splice into a second rope. Leave the knot in place if there is a secondary drop at the point where you get off rope. Be sure to remove the knot when de-rigging to prevent it from getting stuck in cracks or behind flakes when pulling up the rope. Consider tying off the tail of the rope on pitches where there's a risk of the rope getting snagged and hauled partway back up a pitch by cavers while ascending. This prevents inadvertently pulling the rope up and out of reach. Lower the rope down the pitch rather than tossing the rope. A short butterfly coil can be tossed a short distance to get the end of the rope past a nearby obstacle or lip. Alternatively, rappel with the rope in a bag, but be sure there is already a knot in the end before starting down. In order to approach the pitch head safely, rig away from the edge and use a traverse line if necessary, and clip into the rope with a cow's tail or a tethered ascender before approaching an edge. Clean or garden the edge of pitches to eliminate slick areas or loose rock. If gardening is needed, then it's best to keep the rope in a rope bag clipped to your harness during descent. Caves may be rigged with either natural or artificial anchors. Artificial anchors are man-made hardware such as pitons, nuts, or bolts. Natural anchors are naturally occurring features. Some examples of natural anchors are trees or logs near entrances, or rock features within caves including natural bridges, pillars, BFRs, bollards, flakes, thread-throughs, chockstones, and secondary deposits such as stalagmites and columns. There are finite options for natural anchors, and the decision to use them will also determine the location of the trail and its associated impact. When evaluating the impacts of rigging, consider not just the anchors themselves, but the route of travel that will be the direct consequence of anchor location. The main advantages of natural anchors are that they don't require as much equipment or hardware to place, and they may cause less impact in terms of drilled holes or human artifacts that may be left in the cave. It should be kept in mind, though, that safety should always take priority over conservation, and artificial anchors can be placed in a way that mostly mitigates any impact to the cave environment or the aesthetics of the cave. Some negatives of natural anchors are that they can cause excessive abrasion to the rope or webbing. They often require more rope than an artificial anchor, and most importantly, the location of natural anchors may create safety or conservation concerns. There are usually very limited options for natural anchors, and they may be too high or low to safely or comfortably clip into the rope. They may be too close to an edge to approach safely, or they may be in a location that causes the rope to run across sharp edges, over loose rock, across delicate areas, or into flowing water. Natural anchors can be a very safe and low-impact way to rig, but the conservation benefits of avoiding the need for a piton or bolt should be weighed against the other rigging principles that must be considered when choosing an effective anchor. The same principles of serene, in other words strong, efficient, redundant, equalized, and no extension, should be considered when using natural anchors. Note that for some natural anchors, redundancy isn't always practiced. You should never trust a single piece of artificial gear, but some natural anchors are so large and strong that they may be trusted as a single anchor. The common phrase used to describe such an anchor is bomb-proof, and to use a natural anchor without redundancy means it must be completely beyond reproach. There must be zero chance of that anchor ever failing, or the consequences could be fatal. At a minimum, the anchor must be stronger than the rope itself. When rigging to trees, you should use trees that are living and that have an extensive root system. As a general rule, if no backup anchor is to be used, then the tree should be at least 12 inches or 30 centimeters in diameter. If any of these criteria are missing, you can still use the tree as an anchor, but it should be backed up. If using a single tree as an anchor, then the rope should ideally be rigged with a backup to the same tree for redundancy in case of abrasion. The easiest way to rig this is by using webbing around the tree as the main anchor and tie directly to the tree with the tail of the rope as a backup. A rope pad should always be used on the main anchor to protect the cambium of the tree. Damage to the cambium may kill the tree. Just as with trees, natural bridges or pillars should be a minimum of 12 inches or 30 centimeters in diameter if it isn't going to be backed up. If no backup will be used, then a bridge or pillar should be an integral part of the bedrock with no obvious cracks. The bridge or pillar should be tested with a hammer to ensure the feature is solid and that there aren't any hidden defects. It should also be free of any sharp edges, and it is a good idea to protect the rope with a rope pad, especially if the rigging will be left in place for an extended period. When rigging to trees, the preferred method is to use a tensionless anchor, also known as a high-strength tie-off. This retains almost 100% of the full strength of the rope. 3 wraps around a large tree creates enough friction so that there is no load on the tail of the rope. The tail can be tied around the main line as long as there's no tension in order to avoid rope-on-rope friction. A better option is to use a carabiner or my own to avoid the possibility of rope friction being a problem. To add redundancy to a single strong tree, connect the rope to a webbing anchor and tie the tail around the tree as a backup. This reduces the strength by about 25%, but a rope with a knot will have an adequate safety factor for standard single rope technique. The rope can be connected to the webbing with a carabiner or my own, using a figure 8 on a bight or butterfly knot. If rigging to a single natural bridge or pillar, make sure there are no weaknesses or sharp edges. A rope wrapped around a natural feature can be secured with a bowline or figure 8 follow-through knot. Wrapping the rope around the anchor twice will create an inner loop that will cinch down on the anchor. This helps prevent the rope from moving and can reduce abrasion. This also helps when rigging to rocks, bollards, flakes, or stalagmites, where there may be some risk of the rope slipping off the anchor. One of the biggest concerns with natural anchors is rope abrasion. This is especially problematic for rigging that will be left fixed. Using a rope pad around natural anchors will help minimize damage to the rope. Just as with trees, a tensionless wrap may be used with certain types of rock anchors to preserve a greater percentage of the strength of the rope. Where abrasion is a concern, an even better strategy is to rig for redundancy using webbing as the main anchor and the tail of the rope as a backup. Some of the most commonly available natural anchors are large breakdown blocks or chockstones. Ensure that they are heavy and stable enough to be used as an anchor. If wrapping a rope or webbing around breakdown blocks, make sure the shape of the rock and angle of pull on the rope will ensure the rope cannot slip off. As with all natural anchors, check for sharp edges and pad them if needed. Webbing is often used when rigging to rocks because the flat shape allows it to stay in place better, thus reducing abrasion, and it can be more easily replaced if it does abrade. There are a wide variety of natural anchors available, and many ways that they can be rigged safely. Factors such as redundancy, avoiding abrasion, conserving rope in order to be able to reach the bottom of a pitch, safety and convenience getting on and off rope, and conservation of the natural environment are all factors that will need to be considered when deciding the best way to rig.